Hi, you've reached the Talking Racewalking podcast. It's all about racewalking, of course. It's talking to racewalkers from around the world about racewalking. Join me, Noel Payne, a amateur racewalker in Canada, as I talk to elites, Olympians, record holders, masters walkers, and anybody who's out walking as fast as they can. Hi, so this is a section where I'd actually be talking to someone, a race walker. So this is where you can come in. If you know a race walker, you're a race walker, and you have an amazing story, I want to hear from you. So reach out, let's chat, let's get walking and talking. Hi, everyone. Welcome to we're the fourth episode of the Talking Racewalking podcast. I've got a Canadian on this time. So I've got Ben Thorne, who's on with me today to talk racewalking, what he's been up to, what he plans to get up to, and maybe we'll just talk about some racewalk topics that are, well, hot to talk about right now. So welcome, Ben.
Hi, thanks very much for having me on.
I've been, I think we chatted just before we started this podcast, and I mentioned being new to the race walking world. I really wanted to get a chance to talk with you. I entered the world, I guess, a few years after you'd really sort of made a big success and big splash on the race walking world. So it's an honor to have you on board. I guess to start with, those people that are not as familiar with you, Tell us about you. How did your race walking career start?
Well, I grew up in a little town in northwestern British Columbia called Kitimat. That's near the border with Alaska. So I was a runner and a cross-country skier in high school. And in BC, as you may know, we're lucky enough to have high school race walking as like an official track and field event. So,
very lucky, very lucky.
So basically, I was a runner, and I was decent. I was coming sort of middle of the pack at provincial championships and stuff like that. I think I was running like 9:30 or 9:20 for 3,000 meters, which was good for my sort of like podunk town, but not good for like sort of like major metropolitan areas. And I saw race walking was an event, and I was like, I could totally win that. So I did it at my zone meet, and then I did it at provincials. And then one thing sort of like leads to another, and it snowballs, and soon you're on like international teams and going to different countries. I went to the Olympics in 2016, won a World Championship bronze medal in 2015. And yeah, I raced a lot internationally up until about 2018. And 2018 was when I graduated college, and my race walking felt like it was in kind of a plateau at that point, and I was ready to sort of do other stuff with my with my life. I guess I was a little bit. I kind of wanted to leave Vancouver for a little bit, and that's where sort of my coach and my training group was. So I just decided to take a step back, maybe not permanently, but also maybe permanently. So I got an engineering job. My degree was in engineering. So I got an engineering job in Slave Lake, Alberta. That lasted for 10 months until I went to grad school. And now I'm doing my PhD at Harvard in material science. So
Nice.
that's sort of like the state of my race walk progression. And then as soon as I moved here, I guess like it seems like every sort of city in the US or Canada has like a couple of race walkers. So as soon as I like moved here, I sort of like quickly figured out, oh yeah, there's race walkers here. And there was someone looking for a training partner, looking for some like sort of informal coaching. So we meet up, and now I train with one or two other local walkers, and I occasionally show up to international meets, but I've had a foot injury for the last year, so my comeback has sort of been on ice since then. But it's getting better now. So fingers crossed for next season.
Well, then you're very humble about your accomplishments as well. I mean, looking back, you're an Olympian, 2016 Olympics, 2015 was the bronze in the 20K. And if I'm correct, was that was the first sub 120 for a Canadian walker. Was that correct?
Yeah, it was a Canadian record at the time. So yeah, I basically Evan had the Canadian record in, was it Evan? Yeah, I think it was Evan had the Canadian record in 2014. And that stood until the next year when I broke it by 20 odd seconds. And then that stood for 6 months until Anaki broke it by a minute. That was the end of my Canadian record days. I did actually PB in 2016. I broke my PB by 2 seconds, but not enough to break the Canadian record again. And then Anaki's record stood for whatever, six years until Evan smashed it again last year. So that was sort of the progression.
Exactly. Well, you've got what, a world teams silver medal. You've been under 23 champion, silver medals at World University Games, top 8 Commonwealth Games. Is that correct? So I mean, you've got a lot of international competition experience.
Yeah, I went to most of the things. Yeah, sort of. I guess my last in 2018, just before I did my kind of soft retirement, was Commonwealth Games, and that was a really good race. Actually, I came fourth, and pretty like on the faster side for me too. So that was a good race. And then now I think being out of it for a few years, it's sort of hard to know if I'll ever get back to that point. But I guess I'm not training as hard as I used to either. So it's sort of like it's a little bit chiller.
That's I mean, I think life is like that. I think training's like that. You kind of life takes you places you don't know where it's going to take you. I think as you get older as well, your approach to thing and your perspective changes as well. So I did, when you mentioned the record changing up, that made me think about that whole group that was training at that time out west, where there really is a strength in race walking in Canada. You, Evan, Anaki Gomez, that was a strong set of walkers there for a good number of years. Do you think we'll ever see that again?
So I mean, it's hard to say. I think at this point, like I think when I was in it, it didn't feel that unique because it was just like, oh, I guess there's 3 talented people. Like it doesn't seem that unlikely to show up in the same city. I think when I joined it, like I was sort of attracted to Evan and Anaki because they were already training. They were a couple years older than me, so I moved to Vancouver kind of like pretty much specifically to train with them. I went to UBC because it was sort of the one school in Canada where you can race walk in like the collegiate track system because they're part of the NAIA, which is sort of the US competitive collegiate race walking circuit. So I kind of moved there specifically for them. So I guess you could say that like they attracted me. I think what kind of needs to happen now is I could see it honestly forming up again if there were some more like young people who had talent and felt the need to move there. Because I mean, Evan's still training there.
I think he's starting to coach.
He'd make a great training partner for. He's also coaching. Yeah, he coaches the UBC team, which is great. It sounds like a lot of fun. So I could see it happening again if we manage to get some talented youngsters out who are willing to move out there. And then like I guess it's sort of like a I think in Canada, like if we do manage to get some new people, they'll kind of attract each other. Same in the US to a certain extent. In San Diego, where all the walkers live, or at least used to, maybe to a lesser extent now.
Yeah, I think I was talking with Dave McGovern the last podcast, and it's a similar topic, I think, in Canada and US, where we're so thin on the ground, and there's sort of pockets of race walkers. There will often be one coach that brings together a group. So I think it's that ebb and flow, depending on who shows up, who's there, and I think I'd love to see more race walking at the high school level so the youngsters can discover it like you did. Because often I think nowadays, like I mentioned to Dave, it's often us older farts who are getting into race walking after doing running for a long time, and we only have so much potential and so many years. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah, no, I was definitely lucky to grow up in BC because I don't think I'd be doing it otherwise. Um, same with Evan, or maybe he would be interested in it, but
That's hard to
he's
say.
he's a bit more he's a bit more into it than I am, but I think it's probably safe to say that we're both into it because it was already a high school sport.
Completely. So, I mean, and you've mentioned that things have kind of cooled off in the last few years, and
So
you've described it as sort of a soft retirement. So, for those wondering what you've been up to, what does a soft retirement mean? What are Ben's race walking goals in the short term, and what do you picture for the future?
yeah, so I once I sort of got my like little local training group together, so I train with two sort of national level Americans right now. So Katie Miali, who's sort of a national level female, has been to Olympic trials, and then Jason Cheng, who's sort of a national level male. I think he's 23. We just did a workout this morning. Actually, it was real good. We did 22K.
Nice.
Pretty fast for me at least.
I imagine that's pretty fast for most people. So,
Yeah, maybe 8:30 a mile or 5:20 per kilometer. Anyways, I'm rambling. Back to the topic at hand. Yeah, I went to World Team Championships in, I guess it would have been 2021. No, 2022, I think. Yeah, 2022, I went to World Team Champs, and that was sort of like my international comeback race. And then I sort of like, I think I got a little bit too motivated from that and started training a little bit too much and got some plantar fasciitis. So I really wanted to do like 100-mile week. And then I kind of overcooked it, which is a little bit unlike me because usually I don't really like training very hard. So I think I overcooked it, got a little bit injured, and then I've sort of struggled with that for the last year. And now it finally seems like it's getting better. I've been very slowly trying to ramp up the mileage. So I think like 3 months ago, I was sort of like barely walking at all, maybe 20 kilometers a week or something. And now I'm up to like 60 or 70 and just trying to very slowly like piling it on. Like I just did sort of the first speed workout of the year last week. And the Olympics would be an uphill battle at this point, like just based on how the qualifying system works. I would have to get like 2 or 3 like very high quality races in like all basically next year. So it's not looking amazing for that, but I think next year I'll try to go to some of the like the US meets, like the US championships and qualifying meets. They tend to be like easy to score high, and then they typically provide a lot more points with less competition than I would if I had to go over to Europe or something. And same with Canadian nationals. There's a lot of points on the line for Canadian nationals.
yeah,
And
and
then
you did fairly well last year. 124 for
yeah.
last year.
So this year, this calendar year of 2023, I don't think I actually completed a 20K. I started a 35K in San Diego and dropped out after like 20K because I just literally can't go any further than 20K. It's like I run out of gas. Yeah.
Well, and
So I'm just hoping to sort of get back on the circuit, hopefully go to World Team Champs, score some points. Again, Olympics is sort of looking unlikely, but maybe I'll be able to go to World Champs in 2025.
well,
So
I know I'd love to see you make another crack at it. I mean, you're one of the fastest we've had, and correct me if I'm wrong, are you 30 or going on 31 this year? I mean, you're still relatively young in terms of the distance endurance events.
Yeah, I would say that I'm like definitely people are sort of reaching their peak or like in our early 30s. It definitely depends on the person. I would say based on my own trajectory, um, that I think I might have been an early bloomer. Like you don't know for sure until you actually start like training hard again. Whether that was just sort of like a problem of motivation or if it was actually I am an early bloomer. So yeah, it's hard to say because I sort of like had my fastest years when I was 22, 23, and now I'm 30. So maybe I'll get back to where I was. But I also have a lot more going on now. So I'm doing my PhD, which it takes maybe not as much time as it should. Maybe I don't work as hard as I should. I have a lot of hobbies, so I race walk. I've gotten really into mountaineering the last year or two. So I did a big trip to France this summer. Climbed Mont Blanc with a friend of mine.
Oh, love it. I think I saw a couple of photos of you climbing. So yeah, I love people
Yeah, and
who have other passions. So that's
the Cascades. I think next year I either want to go. I think Denali is out. I think that's probably too long of a trip, but I think I might go back to Canada and climb in the Canadian Rockies and stuff. And then that's sort of like what'll happen if I don't make the Olympics kind of thing. I might just go climbing instead.
look,
Yeah.
I think everybody needs A, B, and C plans. And hey, if you like mountains, the only one I've done out there is I've run up and down Fernie. So I've done Fernie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. I could also see Athletics Canada getting really pissed at me if I went on like an expedition or something before the Olympics.
Yeah,
So
they might not like that, but I mean, honestly, in my opinion,
I don't know if they could stop me.
no, I don't think so. Look, I mean, you're an Olympian, you've been to the world, you've done Commonwealth Games, you've done everything. I think at this point in your career, I mean, my perspective would be it's for you to choose at this point where you want to go and what you want to do. So, I mean,
I'm also not getting funding from like Sports Canada anymore, so I feel like I have a little bit more freedom to
choose where you want to
be
go.
like a little bit not committed. Yeah.
Well, that must be a little bit of freedom as well. And I mean, and doing a PhD and at one of the top schools anywhere in the world. So I mean, you've got a lot on your plate right now. So it was I can't imagine what it would be like balancing those two things. But if anybody's going to do it, I can imagine it might be you. So
I mean, race walking is actually one of those things where I guess it's sort of similar with running, where the training volume isn't necessarily outrageous. Like I mean, a top male walker would probably do what 150 kilometers a week, which is
just shy of 100
maybe
miles.
15 hours of training. So it's sort
Yeah,
of like a part-time job. Whereas other endurance sports like cycling or swimming, those people like train all day. So you
exactly. Well,
really wouldn't be able to balance it with anything, but we're a little bit lucky in that sort of if you go too much, you'll get injured. So it sort of keeps the amount of time you have to spend a little bit in check. So we're a little bit lucky in that.
that's interesting
That
to
way.
hear. I'm sure the fact that a lot of race walkers are doing the 35K and it used to be the 50. And
Yeah.
nowadays you see some of the elite marathoners these days hitting upwards of 300 kilometers a week. So it's interesting to hear the approach for race walking. So I got a last question for you.
I think some race walkers definitely do go above that.
Maybe
Can
more
you hear me
toward
now?
those 50K specialists, which probably So one last question I have for you. The state of things in the race walking world. I mean, I think it's going to be a question for a lot of people that I talk to probably of the next little while, but different perspectives as well. So being an Olympian and having competed at the international level, at a very high level, what do you think of what's going on in the race walking world right now? It's from a new person to the sport. It's a very strange time for the sport, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's definitely undergoing changes. So I think we were all kind of disappointed to see the 50K go away. Um, and no one's really been satisfied with the replacements. Like ideally, we would have just had a women's 50K, but there's no extra medal at the Olympics on the table for that. So I guess they felt they had to find some compromise. Um, and that's, I guess, we went to the 35K, which I don't think will help necessarily,
No, most people
just
see it
because it's
seems
a
to me
little
that
bit. Yeah, I think one, it's almost too similar to the 20K at this point, and that's why you've like in major championships we've seen so many people double up because I just don't think it's different enough from the 20K. Um, and then also, yeah, I think I listened to your and Dave's podcast, and I think you were saying that like the technique tends to be a little bit more trustworthy the longer you go. So really, if anything, we should be going longer. Now, maybe that wouldn't be good for me because I don't think I have what it takes for those like sort of long, like super endurance efforts. I think I'm more of kind of like a threshold guy where I can go for like an hour or less
10 to
than two
20
hours
could
at
be good.
least, pretty
Yeah.
fast. But I don't know if I'll ever be able to do like a good like ultra endurance effort. um, and then now there's the marathon relay, which I get that they had to come up with something, but yeah, for all the reasons we just discussed, it's even shorter. It's not that good. Yeah, the sport is in need of innovation, I would say. Um, like it would be
What do you think that might be? I mean, it's I think we can all guess at what that might be, but it's I mean I've got inside line to somebody who's been working on something in the electronic sort of technological aspect that might help in terms of some aspect of the
judging.
sport
Yeah,
judging, but I don't know if that's going to help the sport in terms of bringing back another event at the Olympics or drawing in more people. Any ideas on what does the sport need?
I don't really know. I have some like hot takes that I think a lot of people maybe wouldn't share. So uh, I
Feel free
think
to feel
yeah,
free.
I think there is like a big subset of the of people who are in the racewalk community who kind of just want it to stay the same forever, which I don't really think is possible. Like I think the status quo is maybe like even if we were allowed to keep the 50K, like I'm not really sure if the participation base of racewalk is growing or shrinking over time. I suspect it might be shrinking. I don't really know if there's any data for how that works, but it seems like maybe we need to be doing something else in order to attract more people. Like you said, the best way to do it is through getting more kids involved. Um, but I think in order to get more kids involved, it would be good to like have more fans and generate more hype around the events. And I don't really know what that looks like. I'm a big fan of cycling. I've gotten into it over the last few years, so most of my hot takes are sort of end up making it look more like cycling. um, a couple of years ago, there was this great race walking event called the Tour of Taihu. I think that's what it was called. It was in China. I don't think they have it anymore, sadly. I'd really like to participate. Basically, it was a 4 day event where walkers would do somewhere between 10 and 20K each day. And it's sort of like a stage race.
Nice.
And a lot of the courses were point to point. So instead of having like a 1 or 2K loop, it would sort of be like a point to point race on a road, and the judges would be in golf carts. And the judges would just like hang out of the golf cart and give you a paddle. And
Probably more
I think
accessible to spectators too.
possibly, I mean, race walking is already super accessible to spectators, in my opinion. But yeah, I guess anyone can line up along the side of the course. It's free. I've never seen a race walking event that wasn't free to spectate. But yeah, obviously, like I would like to see events like that, particularly like longer events, events that are point to point, events that have like uphill finishes and stuff like that. I would sort of like to get away from having sort of like standardized distances and like flat courses where everyone tries to break records. Because I think one, the technique doesn't look that great the faster we go. And two, I just think it maybe needs like a little bit more variety. We need sort of like competitive athletes who you sort of like want to question, like, oh, who's going to win this time? You know, like epic matchups. I think if they don't want to make the events longer, then they could do things to make them harder, like make people walk uphill. I actually really liked the course in Oman at the World Team Championships. I know nobody else liked that because it had a hill on it
with that big incline.
Yeah. I thought it was different, and I appreciate differences. The downhill probably isn't so great for the technique, but I think the uphill could be good for races.
Well, it's interesting. I think those were great comments.
Yeah, and then the judging, like all of these things that you could do are sort of limited by the logistics of judging. It's very difficult to have point to point courses if you only have a limited number of judges. You can't have hundreds of judges strung out throughout a whole course. Like you can have judges in golf carts, but people get strung out at these events, so it's logistically pretty difficult to do. So probably before you can get too creative, you would need to have some better solution for the judging, whether that's something electronic. I'm personally in favor of just having cameras, to be honest. I think like race walkers tend to be very against cameras, but it's so much simpler than like having some sort of like fancy electronic rigging to like detect if you're lifting. I don't know if that's what you were sort of hinting at, but we already have something that can detect lifting. It's called cameras.
Yeah.
So honestly, just like it's I think it's just not that hard. Just get some cameras.
Should be interesting. Yeah, I do.
That's kind of my hot take. I don't think anyone else shares it.
I think
everyone else is like, oh, cameras.
I think you'd be surprised. I think you'd be surprised. There's a lot out there. I've had a few conversations, and yeah, there's. I've got like I've talked to Jeff Salvage, who does a lot of video work, and has talked about that topic too. So I think there's.
It's sort of hard because as like an elite athlete or like a former elite athlete,
I think you're still there.
Having more rigorous judging or like different judging can be sort of like ripping off a band-aid, because like it's sort of hard to like want to have more scrutiny on your own technique. Like I've had problems when I was a junior. I had a lot of issues with my technique, and then I managed to solve most of them. Like I've sort of been on the right side of getting DQ'd since I became a senior level athlete, whereas before I'd be more on the wrong side of getting DQ'd. So it's sort of like hard for me to be like, oh, I wish the judging was more rigorous. I want to get DQ'd more, because getting DQ'd sucks. It's the worst. But like I guess it's part of the event. I guess that's another thing that can sort of like scare off younger athletes, is if they get DQ'd, it feels terrible. So
yeah, I definitely think there's some room for improvement. And I wish we had more time to talk on it. This is really enlightening. I think when you get two race walking people talking, it can go on forever. And
yeah, I really think it's great what you're doing with the podcast, by the way. I think podcasts are sort of, if you're just like trying to get into some hobby or topic, and I don't think there's really anything like this that exists for race walking, where sort of like two experts, or experts in quotes, are talking about it. Because usually, I mean, Evan gets interviewed a lot by people who aren't experts, but it's good to have some sort of platform where two like super nerds can really get into the details about it, and you can learn a lot, I think, as someone who's new to the sport, if you can just like sort of look up in Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever and just go, oh, there's a race walking podcast, cool.
I appreciate the comment, and I think I've been trying to do my part in Canada just to, because of my passion for the sport, to kind of get the word out there. So
yeah, this is great. yeah, if you know any walkers who want to join a training group, get them to move to Boston.
All right,
We can
folks,
hang
you've
out.
heard that. Any walkers out there, you know where Ben is, so find him. And Ben,
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure to chat with you. Maybe we can do this in a year or two after you've made that comeback or not, or we'll see what happens. But I'd love to have you on again. Thanks
yeah,
for
anytime.
talking race walking, and good luck with the comeback. Good luck with the foot, and keep walking.
Thanks. You too.
That's it, folks. The end of the podcast. No walkers have been harmed in the recording of this podcast. And of course, at the moment, we have no sponsors or supporters at this point to fund all this amazing podcasting. But if you're out there and have a race walk company that produces some sort of race walk apparel product or something you think race walkers would love, get hold of us. We'd love to have you on board. Give us a holler.